Dmytro Kuleba, it's great to have you on the program, Your Excellency. I want to kick off by asking you to give us a sense of this U.S. intelligence that the Russians have been planning, a propaganda video to potentially jumpstart an invasion into Ukraine. Have you seen this video?
Well, we haven't seen the video itself, but I can tell you that the United States briefed us shortly before the official announcement by Ned Price that they possess this piece of intelligence. So now we're looking forward for details. But if you ask me, is there anything that Russia couldn't do in order to provoke the war? My answer would be no. You can recall Crimea, when actually the takeover of Crimea was a false flag operation, because Russian troops were ordered to take off their insignia and basically operate under an unidentified flag. So everything is possible, and we should take every risk into account.
The last time we spoke was in December of last year. At that time, you said you don't know if an invasion would happen, but if it did happen, it could happen within the blink of an eye. Is that still your assessment today?
That was the feeling, and this feeling accompanied, I think, all of us throughout January. But actually what we're seeing today is that diplomacy works, that the threat of invasion in December, in early January, in middle January, then late January is postponed. And it means that Ukraine and the West won against Russia in this first round.
You feel like they've already won?
We have won in this round by pushing Russia to keep this military plan on the table, but not actually activating it.
One of the things we also discussed back in December was the thought of economic sanctions. And in the subsequent weeks, we've heard again and again from various Western officials saying that this would be the most aggressive package of sanctions ever on Russia. And some details, but not specifics. You told me at that time that they needed to get specific if they wanted to deter President Putin. Do you believe he's been deterred?
He has been deterred so far, but it doesn't mean that the problem is left behind, and we haven't crossed, the critical point yet. And there are two things which have to be kept on mind. First, the broad narrative: if you do this, you will suffer from the most severe sanctions, doesn't work anymore. Russia has been hearing it for months, and they learned how to live with this message.
Yeah.
So now it's time to actually disclose the sanctions that will be imposed on Russia, so that they can really see that the West is united and the sanctions are prepared.
You want the West to get specific?
Absolutely. It's high time to get specific. And otherwise, Russia will think that this is just not serious. The second point, it would be really effective if the West could impose some sanctions on Russia now.
Like what?
Well, Russia has done so many mean things in the past years, like the passportization of Ukrainian citizens in Donbas. This is a clear violation of Minsk agreements. This is a violation of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. So a set of at least one, economic sanctions could be imposed for that, and that would send a strong message that the will is there. The will to act is there, and Russia should be very cautious in its calculations of further actions.
Well, Russia's been building up their reserves for years now as a buffer to U.S. sanctions and the potential for more sanctions as well. There are limits, no doubt, to economic diplomacy, if you will. What does Ukraine want the West to do beyond sanctions?
Last November, when the United States were the first to ring the bell of about the potential Russian invasion in Ukraine, and I appreciate their leadership in mobilizing the support of other countries, I came up with a very simple idea of a comprehensive deterrence package that consists of 3 layers. The first one is diplomacy, the second one is economic sanctions, the third one is advanced military support to Ukraine to strengthen our capability to defend ourselves, because strong Ukraine is the best deterrence measure against Russia. Now I would add the fourth element to it. It's helping Ukraine to maintain its financial and economic stability, because one of the goals Russia tries to pursue is to destabilize Ukraine from inside and throw it into chaos without actually resorting to military force, but through disinformation campaigns, through cyber attacks, through threats of war, which really hits the markets. Every time the message that the war is there makes it to the headlines, our currency goes down. We succeeded in stabilizing it, and we're pretty strong now. I think we're in a very strong position now, but these four elements are critical to deter Russia.
How would you perceive the geopolitical risk narrative at this point? Because we've got oil above $90 a barrel, you've got higher energy prices across Europe, as you know. Is the market reflecting what's actually happening on the ground in terms of that risk?
We had a very turbulent January, let's be frank. Markets reacted violently to the messaging and to the developments. But look at the beginning of February. We're in a very stable position. Ukraine is confident in itself. Partners, including the United States, sent a number of messages proving their confidence in Ukraine. So markets are stable now, and it shows that even under these circumstances, we can handle the situation and maintain and uphold the financial and economic stability. And this is the success, and it's one of the reasons why I'm saying that Ukraine and the rest of the West won in this round against Russian attempts to destabilize us.
President Zelensky, just a couple of days ago, essentially pushed back on the White House's narrative that invasion was imminent. The White House walked those words back. What is the difficulty there in terms of the mixed messaging in your view? Because on the one hand, he pushed back on the White House saying invasion isn't imminent, let's think about our words, and at the same time, you're raising a civilian defense force that you're hoping will be 130,000 strong within just a matter of weeks.
Well, Ukraine does not belong to any military alliance of collective defense, which in simple words means that no one is going to fight for us. And that's not what we expect. We've been fighting this war for 8 years and we know how to do it. The only thing that we ask from partners is to help us fight this war. And therefore, when our partners are helping, we get stronger, we become more successful, the price of potential aggression for Russia raises. In the last 2 weeks, I must tell you, many people in Ukraine improved their English skills simply by trying to understand the exact meaning of the word imminence and what imminent means. There was a lot of many discussions around that. But the point is that we've been in this war since 2014, as I said, and for us it's permanently imminent. But if you send just a simple message, the war is imminent, it really destabilizes the situation. So it's not, you cannot always explain a difficult situation with just simple words. The situation is far more complex, but it's stable, it's under control, and I'm sure that in the end we will prevail.
When you think about this with regards to President Putin's position, he's in China right now. He's meeting with his so-called dear friend, President Xi Jinping. It's the 37th time that they've met. Mr. Putin, of course, has a major gas pipeline that goes to China. He already has deals with the Chinese to offload his natural resources to that country. If he were to be pushed out of the West in terms of his natural resources, in terms of those sanctions, he's obviously going to be looking to other markets to make up for that shortfall. Does it worry you that the potential for more deals in China and better relations with other countries could hurt the West's ability to hurt him with economic sanctions?
The argument that we should comfort Putin in order to prevent him from sliding into the hands of China is a false argument for a simple reason. First, he's already in the hands of China. And second, he will always care for his trade and the supply of gas and oil to the West, to Europe. That's not something that he can replace with supplies to China, simply because the infrastructure that has been built since Soviet times connecting Russian oil bases and gas bases with European consumers is so advanced, and he can make so much money on it that it's impossible to achieve that. This argument is being brought up in some European capitals as a fear, but they should think rationally, and they should not use this argument as an excuse for their reluctance to act against Russia in a resolved and concentrated way.
I want to ask you about that reluctance, specifically with regards to Germany. When we spoke back in December, we talked about Nord Stream 2. You felt at that time that they should shut the pipeline down completely and it should never go into use. What's your feeling now when you take a look at what's happened over the last several weeks? So many partners in the West have been supportive of Ukraine, but Germany, an outlier in some respects.
Well, Nord Stream 2 should have become operational at least 3 years ago. And the fact that it's still, that the work is still in progress means that the strategy of containing Nord Stream 2 as a Russian leverage against the West has been working. And Ukraine played, a very important part in it. We are not hiding away from that. Now, Germany is a very important partner, a very friendly partner to Ukraine, but there is some issues, like 5 issues. Where,
the helmets?
Well, the helmets, under the current circumstances...
Hardly the defensive weapons you were looking for.
Let me put it this way. The helmets under current circumstances are frustrating. Germany definitely can do more. Germany is trying to play a big role in this struggle. Next week, Foreign Minister of Germany will be visiting Ukraine. She's a good person. She is a person of integrity, and we will discuss all these difficulties with her. But I can tell you that Germany can and should do more, not because of Ukraine, but because of its position in Europe and because of the need to secure, to maintain security in the Euro-Atlantic space. Because what's happening here in Ukraine is not only about Ukraine. If the West fails here, it will send a very simple message to the entire world, including to Far East Asia, that the West is incapable of defending what it stands for and incapable of defending itself. That is the motivation I think no one, neither in Germany nor in Washington, wants to give.
Walk me through what's happening here at home, because I had the chance to sit down in an interview with your former president, Petro Poroshenko, and he was essentially saying that the treason charges he is facing and the terror financing charges that he is facing and the terror collaboration charges he's facing are a gift to Putin because they expose the discomfort that the Zelensky administration has, not just with himself, but with other political opponents. How do you respond to that?
President Putin has a friend in Ukraine. His name is Viktor Medvedchuk. President Putin is actually the godfather of Mr. Medvedchuk's daughter. And Mr. Medvedchuk and then President Poroshenko were part of a certain process in 2014, 2016. So there is a criminal case against Viktor Medvedchuk, and by the way, he's on the U.S. sanctions list. And this criminal case includes the investigation, and the criminal case includes a number of other persons, and former President Poroshenko is one of them. Now, in this country, we have courts, we have the rule of law, and it's a legal process. The case that I'm talking about is actually a business scheme that was built in order to supply coal from Ukrainian occupied territories to mainland Ukraine at the cost of the budget. And this needs to be investigated. This case needs to be considered by the court, but no one is persecuting President Poroshenko. There is a procedure that needs to be followed, and there is a toolkit of legal opportunities to defend himself in the court. Now, we are not the country. We learned our lessons about political persecutions. We had some in our history. We are not going to repeat that again.
Yeah. The former president essentially told me yesterday that he's unsure if he'll get a fair trial. Now, the judiciary and the freedom of the judiciary was something that was questioned when he was in office. President Zelensky has questioned the independence of the judiciary in this country. Do you believe he'll get a fair trial here?
I think any person who is facing the court in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in any other country, including Ukraine, has doubts that the trial will be fair, because of course that person wants to be acquainted, and that's normal. Anyone who has to face charges takes the risk and thinks there is a risk of not facing a fair trial. But this particular case is in the spotlight of the media, of human rights defenders, of civil society, of international media, and therefore I think it would be suicidal not to, for this country not to conduct this case on the principle of a fair trial.
In recent weeks, Kyiv has become an epicenter for a flurry of diplomatic activity. Western leaders, delegations from the United States, coming to get an idea or a sense of what's happening really here on the ground. What is the message that you're sending to these diplomats?
You know, in the Cold War, there was this famous shuttle diplomacy, when mediators were shuttling between conflicting parties and fixing issue, but usually there was like one mediator or two mediators. Now we live in a very decentralized world. This is 21st century. So we came up with this idea of a network diplomacy, where many players can do something that is in their power to make a difference, to make an impact on Russia. But the center of this network diplomacy is in Kyiv. And this last week, and actually the next week, will be just the symbols of the success of this network diplomacy, because we know everything that Russia tells to our partners who communicate with them, and we know everything that partners tell to Russia because they coordinate that with us. That really deprives Putin of space. That corners him because everything is coordinated. And as long as we continue this approach, we will be successful. And when I say we, I mean Ukraine and the rest of the West. The message we are sending to partners here is that, guys, we are strong, we are confident, we have no other chance but to win, and that's what we are aiming for. There are red lines which we will not cross. First, we will not engage, we will not recognize Russia as mediator and not as party to the conflict. It's a party to the conflict. It waged this war. Second, we will not follow the logic of all previous years when we were encouraged by partners to make concessions in order to motivate Russia to make concessions. No, now it's time for Russia to make concessions. We have to turn tables. I'm making this point to all of my guests that, guys, Russia is asking all of us questions. How are we going to ensure our security without inflicting damage on Russian security? And instead of writing answers to that question, we should ask Russia how you are going to ensure your security without inflicting damage on the security of Ukraine, Georgia, and the entire Euro-Atlantic space. We should go on counteroffensive. We shouldn't allow Russia to dominate the field all the time. That's, you know, the diplomatic game. So, and this is kind of messages that we are conveying to partners, and partners come here with political support, with military support, with financial support. So this is a really result-oriented diplomacy.
But when you put 3,000 additional U.S. troops in Eastern Europe, doesn't that play to his narrative that he's being encircled by NATO?
Well, you know, even if NATO border would end up on the Atlantic coast of the United States, Putin would still be saying that he's encircled by NATO. Russia is a master of making up different arguments and reasons why it's endangered, why it's encircled, and this is the point I'm making. We shouldn't be buying into it. We should strongly stand by our belief that no one has the right to decide for someone else on someone else's future. And when the United States decide to deploy more troops to Central Europe, to the so-called eastern flank of NATO, it's actually the part of the counteroffensive strategy that I'm talking about. Because Putin says, I want NATO infrastructure to be rolled back to the status quo of 1997, which means central NATO infrastructure should be withdrawn from Central European countries from the eastern flank of NATO. And the United States is saying, no, no, gentlemen, we're actually moving in, we are reinforcing the eastern flank. This is kind of logic that I also want to see being applied to Ukraine, because, again, it's not because I'm Ukrainian and I want to make Ukraine center of the world, which is a good idea, but it's not my intention. But the future of Euro-Atlantic security is being decided here in Ukraine. And therefore, it's really important to consider Ukraine as part of the overall Western security architecture and to help us win in this struggle.
Do you believe that having President Biden in the White House is a better outcome for Ukraine than his predecessor, Donald Trump?
You are pulling me into U.S. domestic politics. We respect every president chosen by, I'm a diplomat, I know how to answer these kind of questions. We respect every president elected by the people of the United States. We are lucky to have now the president who understands Ukraine very well, who knows the origins of this entire struggle, who was in the very beginning of this struggle, and who knows the treacherous manner of President Putin and the way he handles foreign affairs and relations with immediate neighbors. This is clearly an advantage.
Foreign Minister, it's great to have you on the program. Thank you so much for joining CNBC.
Thank you.